Okay, I need to be so fast because they are doing construction right behind my house. So if I randomly jump inside, I apologize. But thanks so much for tuning. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Extra Credit with Devlin with a Z. As you heard, it's kind of loud out here, so I have to be really, really fast. But if you're like me, you like pop culture, you might have tuned in to the Grammys for just a little bit, or you might have seen some clips on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. But something I really want to talk about is what I discovered while watching the Grammys about my personal bias towards a specific type of people. So I will include a clip of what I'm referring to.
There was a time in my life, y'all, that I was broken. That's why I wrote this album. I didn't think I had a chance, y'all. There was days that I thought the darkest things. I was a horrible human. There was a moment in my life that all I had was a Bible this big and a radio the same size and a 6x8 foot cell. And I believed that those two things could change my life. I believed that music had the power to change my life and God had the power to change my life. And I want to tell y'all right now, Jesus is for everybody. Jesus is not owned by one political party. Jesus is not owned by no music label. Jesus is Jesus, and anybody can have a relationship with him. I love you, Lord.
So this musical artist is Jelly Roll. He is a country artist that I know little to nothing about, like absolutely nothing. The only thing I know about him is that my dad is a really big fan of him because he's a good guy, I guess. Go off on me in the comments for not knowing who he is. That is completely on me. But during his acceptance speech, he goes on stage and immediately is like, I want to thank Jesus, 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 Jesus. And typically when someone is super outspoken about their faith, specifically when it comes to Christianity, Jesus, Godness, whatever, I will automatically assume the worst and automatically assume that they are MAGA or Republicans or Trump supporters. And boy, was I proven wrong when Jelly Roll, midway through his speech, says, Jesus is for everyone. Jesus does not belong to a certain political party. Prior to him saying that, I wasn't really paying attention. I saw he goes on stage. I'm like, all right, whatever, country award. I don't really care. I'm on my phone. And that, brought me back into it. All of a sudden, I'm engaged. I'm listening to what he has to say. And he said some pretty cool things. And I think this more so is a huge reflection of my own personal bias and how, despite being on the right side of history and fighting the good fight, I'm sure that, obviously myself, along with a couple other, liberals, Democrats who are my age, maybe older, maybe younger even, do hold biases about other people. We like to say that we don't judge. We like to say that we welcome everybody. But at the end of the day, that is not entirely true. I don't think that a single person could say that they have no biases whatsoever, And for me, my bias stands with people who claim Christianity and claim to love Jesus and love God. And that's something about myself that I really need to change, because just because somebody is a Christian and loves Jesus, that doesn't mean that they're a bad person. That doesn't mean that they're MAGA. That does not mean that they support Donald Trump. And I did not think that on a Sunday night while watching the Grammys, I was going to have this crazy wake up call about who I am as a person, and the need to reflect some of my personal biases and maybe some people who I've disregarded, who I've met, in real life because they've said that they're a Christian. And I've mentioned this on the Stephanie Miller Show. I'm very open about this, but I grew up Catholic. I attended Catholic school. I've gotten my first communion. I will probably attend an Ash Wednesday, ceremony at a local, Catholic church if I can find one. It's not something I've completely disregarded. I would say at this point, I am more agnostic than anything. I believe there is a higher power. I don't know what that higher power is, but it's something that, I'm kind of interested in still. I don't know if I would say I'm Catholic, but I'm definitely not Christian. And I think because of my own personal experience with the Catholic Church and the Catholic religion, and coming to terms with the fact that I don't really align with that, despite spending the majority of my life studying that has led to my own personal bias about people who do associate with that, especially Christianity. And when I think Christianity, I think of mega churches in the South. I think of some people who do use Jesus as an excuse. Our current administration, they use Jesus as an excuse for all the horrible things they're doing, yet what they're doing cannot be further from the actual teachings of Jesus. John Fugelsang talks about this all the time. He literally just wrote a freaking book about it. And this is not a new ideology or, new rhetoric, but it's something that I had never really thought about too deeply before Sunday night watching the Grammys, which is pretty crazy. And I guess my message or call to action for today is anything that along the lines of taking a step back and reflecting on your own personal bias. Have you previously disregarded somebody because they said that they are a Christian, or that they follow the teachings of Jesus or God or read the Bible or anything like that? I just feel like if we, as a party can eliminate our own personal biases and be more open minded and be more welcoming, we can, try to bridge these gaps. And again, this is something we talk about on the Stephanie Miller Show all the time. But as we get further and further into the tyranny of this, administration, we're going to see people who are starting to realize that they may have made a mistake, people who want to come to the light side. And though we can keep them at an arm's length and they are the voters that caused us in the first place, it is important to welcome them in and be open minded, because at the end of the day, we're going to need as many people as possible to eventually win this fight. And also, when we hold personal biases and when we automatically assume the worst about people, we end up pushing each other further and further away. And 2026, my mentality is to bridge the gap between everybody, bridge the gap between enemies, bridge the gap between generations, bridge the gap between, I don't know, me and my neighbor who I've never spoken to. 2026 is the year of peace, love, community, and all that good stuff. How could you be against that? Outros are really difficult, and I hate being like, follow me on Blue Sky, follow me on Instagram, but yeah, follow me on all the socials and hit me up if you have any suggestions for segments that you'd want me to do on this little segment right here. And per usual, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you at some point this week. Also, I may not be Catholic anymore, but I do love an Easter basket.